4 years. 4 years I'd been working in Singapore, building a consulting practice from scratch, sending money home every month, calling every Sunday. 4 years since I'd seen my childhood home in Portland with my own eyes. When my contract finally ended, I didn't tell anyone I was coming home early. I wanted to surprise my parents. The taxi pulled up to the Victorian house on Laurel Street, and my stomach dropped. Something was wrong. The rose bushes my mother had tended for 30 years were overgrown and dying. The porch swing where Dad used to read his paper every morning was gone. The house number had been changed to a modern steel plate that looked completely out of place against the original 1920s facade. I paid the driver and stood on the sidewalk with my suitcase, staring. The paint was a different color, a dark gray instead of the warm cream my parents had chosen 5 years ago. I took a deep breath and walked up the front steps. Before I could use my key, the door swung open. A woman I'd never seen before stood there in yoga pants and an oversized sweater, a coffee mug in her hand. She was maybe 45, blonde, with an expression that went from surprised to hostile in seconds. "Can I help you?" she asked, not moving from the doorway. "I'm Linda," I said, confused. "Harold and Margaret's daughter. I just flew in from Singapore. Who are you?" "I'm Nicole." She crossed her arms, still blocking the entrance. "David's wife." David. My older brother. I hadn't spoken to him in 6 months, not since he'd stopped returning my calls. We'd never been close, even as children, but we'd maintained a polite distance as adults. I knew he'd gotten married 2 years ago to someone he'd met online, but we hadn't been invited to the wedding. "Okay," I said slowly. "Is my mother home? My father? They're not here right now." Nicole's grip tightened on her coffee mug. "You should have called ahead." "This is my parents' house," I said, my voice sharpening. "I grew up here. I don't need to call ahead." "Actually," Nicole said, her lips curving into a smile that didn't reach her eyes, "this is our house now. Harold and Margaret signed it over to David 18 months ago. So yes, you do need to call ahead. And you should probably leave." The world tilted. I grabbed the porch railing. "What are you talking about? Signed it over? My parents would never—" "Well, they did." She started to close the door. "Have a nice day." I jammed my foot in the gap. "Where are my parents?" "I don't know. Maybe they went shopping. Maybe they went for a walk. It's not really my concern." She pushed harder on the door, and I had to step back or risk breaking my foot. The door slammed in my face. I stood there, shaking. This couldn't be real. My parents had owned this house for 45 years. My grandfather had helped them buy it in 1980. Mom had always said she wanted to die in this house, that they'd never sell it, that someday it would pass to me and David to split. I pulled out my phone and called Mom's cell. It rang 6 times, then went to voicemail. I tried Dad's phone. Same thing. I called David. Straight to voicemail, his mailbox full. Something was very, very wrong. I walked around the side of the house, past the gate that used to squeak but now had a new lock on it. I climbed over it, landing in the backyard where I'd played as a child. The garden was gone. The vegetable beds Mom had cultivated were filled with gravel and weeds. The old oak tree still stood, but the tire swing had been removed. And then I saw the garage. The side door was partially open. I heard something, a faint sound. Coughing. I ran. My father was sitting on a folding chair inside the garage, wearing a thin jacket even though it was 50 degrees outside. He looked up when I entered, and his face went through a series of emotions so fast I could barely track them. Surprise, joy, fear. "Linda?" His voice cracked. "What are you doing here? Dad?" I rushed to him, dropping to my knees. He looked terrible. He'd lost at least 30 pounds since I'd seen him last on video chat. His clothes were dirty and hung off his frame. There were dark circles under his eyes. "Dad, what's happening? Why are you in the garage? Where's Mom?" He glanced toward the back of the garage, where I suddenly noticed an air mattress on the floor, covered with old blankets. My mother was lying there, her eyes closed. "Mom!" I scrambled over to her. She was breathing, but shallowly. Her skin was pale, almost gray. "Mom, wake up! It's me! It's Linda!" Her eyes fluttered open. When she recognized me, tears immediately started streaming down her face. "Baby," she whispered, "you came." Of course I came. What is this? Why are you out here? I looked around the garage. There was a space heater plugged into the wall, barely putting out any warmth, a plastic bin with some clothes, a few bottles of water, a box of crackers. They were living in the garage. In November, in Oregon. Dad, I said, my voice shaking, tell me what happened. He looked at the door to the house, then back at me. David needed a place to stay, he said quietly. When he got married, we said they could move in for a few months, just until they got on their feet. That was 2 years ago, I said. I know. Dad's hands trembled. Things changed. Nicole said the house was too small for all of us. She needed her space. She said we could fix up the garage, make it nice. Make it nice? I looked around at the concrete floor, the bare walls, the single light bulb hanging from the ceiling. Dad, this is a garage. You can't live here. We don't mind, Mom said weakly, but I could hear the lie in her voice. Where's your furniture? All your things? The photos? Your books? Mom's china collection? Neither of them answered. They sold them, Dad finally said. Nicole had an estate sale, said we didn't need all that clutter. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Dad, that was your furniture, your possessions. How could you let them— We didn't let them do anything, Dad said, and for a moment I saw a flash of his old spirit, the strong man who'd raised me. But what could we do? The house is in David's name now. We signed it over. You what? Last year, David said we were getting older, and it would be easier for estate planning if the house was in his name. He said we'd still live here, of course. It was just paperwork. Just paperwork. I stood up, my heart pounding. Dad, do you understand what that means? You don't own your house anymore. You have no legal right to be here. I know, he said, and he looked so old, so defeated. But what could we do? I heard footsteps approaching. The door to the house opened, and Nicole stepped out, followed by a man I barely recognized. David had put on weight, his hair was graying at the temples, and he wore an expression I'd never seen on his face before. Arrogance, entitlement. Linda, he said, not sounding at all surprised. Nicole told me you stopped by. David, what the hell is going on? I stood between him and our parents. Why are Mom and Dad living in the garage? They're not living in the garage, he said calmly. They're temporarily staying in the converted guest quarters while we renovate the main house. Converted guest quarters? This is a garage. There's no bathroom, no kitchen, no heat. There's a space heater, Nicole pointed out, and they can use the bathroom in the house. When you let them, I said. What time do you unlock the door? When are they allowed to piss in their own house? Nicole's face flushed. Watch your language. This isn't their house anymore. It's ours. And if you don't like the arrangement, you can take them somewhere else. Oh, I will, I said. Mom, Dad, pack your things. You're coming with me. Linda, wait. David held up his hand. Let's talk about this like adults. Adults? You want to talk like adults? Fine. Explain to me how you ended up with Mom and Dad's house. Explain to me why they're living in a garage in November. Explain to me why Mom looks like she weighs 90 pounds. They signed the house over voluntarily, David said. I have the paperwork. All legal, all notarized. As for their living situation, that was their choice. We offered them the downstairs bedroom, but Mom said she wanted to be close to her gardening supplies. What gardening supplies? There's no garden. Well, she's been forgetful lately, Nicole said with fake sympathy. Maybe she doesn't remember. I looked at my mother, who was trying to sit up on the air mattress. Mom, is that true? Did you choose to live out here? She opened her mouth, glanced at David, then looked down. I don't remember, she whispered. She doesn't remember because it's not true, I said. Dad, did you choose this? Linda, please, Dad said. Don't make trouble. Don't make trouble? Dad, I stopped, realizing something. You're afraid of them. You're afraid of your own son. The silence that followed confirmed everything. David stepped forward. I think you should leave. You're upsetting them. I'm upsetting them? Are you insane? This is private property, Nicole said, pulling out her phone. If you don't leave, I'm calling the police. Please do, I said. Let's explain to the police why 2 80-year-olds are sleeping in a garage. They're not in distress, David said. They have shelter, food, water. They're here voluntarily, and you're trespassing. I looked at my parents. Mom was crying silently. Dad was staring at the ground. They looked terrified. Not of me, but of what would happen after I left. Fine, I said. I'll leave, but I'll be back. And when I come back, I'm bringing help. I walked out of the garage and around to the front of the house. My suitcase was on the lawn, literally thrown out. I grabbed it and walked down the street, my phone already out. First call. A lawyer. I found one on Google who specialized in elder law and left a detailed voicemail. Second call. Adult Protective Services. I explained the situation, gave them the address, and they said they'd send someone out within 24 hours. Third call. A hotel to book a room. I sat in the hotel room that night, trying to process everything. 4 years. I'd been gone 4 years, and in that time, my brother had somehow convinced my parents to sign over their house, moved in with his new wife, and exiled them to the garage. How had this happened? I'd talked to them every week. They'd never said anything. But now, thinking back, I remembered things. The last few months, Mom had sounded off during our calls. Distracted. She'd cut conversations short, saying she was tired. Dad had stopped getting on the phone at all. When I'd asked about it, Mom had said he was napping. I'd been so focused on my work, on my new life in Singapore, that I hadn't pushed. I'd told myself they were just getting older, more tired. I'd ignored the warning signs. The lawyer called me back at 8 the next morning. Her name was Patricia Chen, and she sounded like someone who didn't take any nonsense. "Tell me everything," she said. I did. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "Okay," she said. "Here's what we're going to do. First, I need to see that deed transfer paperwork. If your brother coerced them, or if they weren't mentally competent when they signed, we can challenge it. Second, we need medical evaluations for both parents. Third, I'm going to file a restraining order to prevent your brother from interfering with our access to your parents. And fourth, we're going to take this son of a bitch down." I could have cried with relief. "How much is this going to cost?" "Let's worry about that after we get your parents safe," Patricia said. "Meet me at the house in 2 hours. I'm bringing a notary and a doctor. We're going to document everything." I went back to the house with Patricia and her team. Nicole answered the door with the same hostile expression. "You again." "I'm Patricia Chen, attorney at law," Patricia said, handing her a business card. "I need to speak with Harold and Margaret immediately. They don't want to talk to you." "That's interesting," Patricia said, "because I haven't asked them yet. Are you preventing me from speaking with my clients?" "They're not your clients." "They are as of 6:45 this morning when Linda called me on their behalf. Now, you can either let me speak with them or I can come back with the police and Adult Protective Services. Your choice." Nicole's face went red, but she stepped aside. We walked through my childhood home, which had been completely redecorated. Everything my parents had owned was gone. In its place was modern furniture, all white and chrome. There were photos of Nicole and David on every surface, no pictures of me or of my parents. In the kitchen, I saw something that made me stop cold. My mother's antique china cabinet, the one that had belonged to her grandmother, was in the corner, but it was empty. When I pulled open the drawers, they were filled with Nicole's yoga clothes. We went to the garage. Mom and Dad were awake, huddled together on the air mattress. When they saw Patricia and the others, they looked terrified. "It's okay," I said, kneeling beside them. "These people are here to help. This is Patricia. She's a lawyer. She's going to make sure you're safe." Patricia spent an hour with them, taking notes, recording video with their permission. The doctor examined them both. Mom was severely underweight and dehydrated. Dad had a respiratory infection that hadn't been treated. The doctor said they needed to be hospitalized immediately. "No," Dad said. "No hospitals. We're fine." "Dad, you're not fine." "If we go to the hospital, David will lock us out completely," he said quietly. "At least here we have shelter." "Mr. Mitchell," Patricia said gently, "your son has already locked you out. You're living in a garage. Let us help you." While we were talking, David and Nicole came out. David's face was red. "You need to leave. All of you. This is harassment. This is elder abuse," Patricia said calmly. "I have documented evidence of neglect, possible fraud, and illegal eviction. I'm filing paperwork today to have the deed transfer investigated, and I'm requesting an emergency hearing to establish a temporary guardianship for your parents. They don't need a guardian. They're fine. They're living in a garage, Mr. Mitchell. A judge is going to disagree with your definition of fine. This is their fault, Nicole burst out. They refused to follow our house rules. They kept going into the kitchen at night, eating our food, leaving messes. We told them if they couldn't respect our space, they needed to stay out here. I stared at her. Their space? This was their house for 45 years. Not anymore, she snapped. And honestly, they're lucky we let them stay at all. Most people would have put them in a home. A home would be better than this, I said. Oh, would it? David said. Because I seem to remember you being too busy in Singapore to worry about them. I'm the one who's been here. I'm the one who took them to their appointments, paid their bills, kept this house from falling apart. Where were you? His words hit like a slap, because part of me knew they were true. I hadn't been here, but that didn't excuse this. You're right, I said quietly. I wasn't here, but I'm here now, and I'm not leaving without them. The standoff lasted another hour. Finally, Patricia made a call, and 2 officers from the Portland Police Department arrived. They listened to Patricia's explanation, examined the garage, and talked to my parents. One of them took David aside. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I saw David's expression change from angry to worried. The officer came back. Sir, ma'am, he said to my parents, do you want to stay here? Mom looked at Dad. Dad looked at the house. Then he looked at me. No, he said, his voice stronger than I'd heard it since I arrived. No, we don't want to stay here. Then you're free to leave with your daughter. This is ridiculous, David said. They can't just leave. Their names are still on bills, on insurance. They need to. They need to be safe and cared for, the officer interrupted. Which they clearly aren't here. We'll be filing a report, and I suspect someone from Adult Protective Services will be contacting you very soon. It took an hour to gather what few belongings my parents had. I packed their clothes, their medications, some photos that David had apparently thrown into a box in the corner. When we were done, I loaded them into my rental car. As we drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror. David and Nicole stood on the porch, watching us leave. Nicole had her phone out, probably calling a lawyer of her own. I checked my parents into a hotel suite near mine. The doctor I'd hired came to examine them thoroughly and prescribed medications for both. I ordered room service, got them clean clothes from a nearby store, and sat with them while they ate the first real meal they'd had in who knows how long. I'm sorry, Dad said as he finished a bowl of soup. We should have told you what was happening. Why didn't you? We didn't want to burden you, Mom said. You were so happy in Singapore. You were doing so well. And David kept saying it was temporary, that he just needed some time. We hoped it would get better. When did it start? About 6 months after he moved in, Dad said. Little things at first. Nicole didn't like our furniture, said it was old-fashioned. Then she said the living room was hers, and we needed to stay upstairs. Then the kitchen was off limits because we were making messes. Then, he shrugged. Then it was the garage or nothing. The deed, I said. Tell me about signing over the house. Dad looked ashamed. David said it was for estate planning. He said when we died, the house would have to go through probate, and it would be expensive and complicated. He said if we transferred it now, it would save everyone trouble. He brought a notary to the house. We signed the papers. Were you mentally competent when you signed? I think so, Dad said uncertainly, although I'd been feeling confused. David had been giving me some pills. He said they were vitamins, but they made me foggy. I felt rage building in my chest. Did he pressure you to sign? He said if we didn't, he'd have to move out. He said Nicole was pregnant and they needed a stable home. Dad's voice cracked. He said we were being selfish. Is Nicole pregnant? No, Mom said bitterly. That was a lie, one of many. Over the next 3 days, Patricia worked fast. She subpoenaed the deed transfer documents and discovered irregularities. The notary was a friend of Nicole's who wasn't actually licensed in Oregon. The signatures didn't quite match my parents' usual signatures. The date on the document didn't match the date it was supposedly notarized. It was fraud. Clear, obvious fraud. Patricia also filed for emergency guardianship, which a judge granted after reviewing the doctor's reports and photos of the garage. The judge was furious, calling it one of the most egregious cases of elder abuse she'd seen. We filed a criminal complaint. The police investigated, interviewing neighbors who confirmed that my parents had been living in the garage for months. One neighbor said she'd called Adult Protective Services twice, but David had always been there during the visits and convinced them everything was fine. The breaking point came when Patricia's investigator discovered that David had been stealing from our parents' accounts. Over the past 18 months, he'd transferred nearly $200,000 from their savings into accounts he controlled. Money they'd saved for their retirement, for their care, for emergencies, gone. That's when the district attorney got involved. I'll never forget the day the police came to the house with an arrest warrant. I'd taken my parents back, accompanied by Patricia and 2 officers. We had a court order giving us access to retrieve more belongings. Nicole answered the door in a robe, her hair messy. "You again? We have a restraining order." "No, you don't," Patricia said. "We do. Against you. And these officers are here to arrest your husband for fraud, theft, and elder abuse." David came down the stairs. When he saw the police, he tried to run back up, but they were faster. They read him his rights, while Nicole screamed that this was a mistake, that we'd set him up, that he'd done nothing wrong. They arrested her, too, for her role in the scheme. Turns out she'd been the one to find the fake notary. She'd also been the one who sold all my parents' possessions without permission. The trial took 8 months. In that time, I moved my parents into a small house near mine in Lake Oswego. I'd taken a job with a Portland firm so I could be close to them. They slowly regained weight, color returned to their faces, and Dad's spirit came back bit by bit. Mom started therapy to deal with the trauma of what David had done. She had nightmares about being locked in the garage, about being cold and hungry. She cried a lot at first, grieving the loss of her son, the person she'd thought David was. "I keep thinking about when he was little," she said one day. "He was such a sweet boy. Where did that boy go?" "I don't know, Mom," I said, holding her hand. "But that boy is gone. The man he became did terrible things to you." The trial was painful. David's lawyer tried to argue that our parents had consented to everything, that they'd wanted to simplify their lives, but the evidence was overwhelming. The fake notary admitted to everything in exchange for a lighter sentence. The bank records showed the theft clearly, and the photos of the garage, combined with medical testimony about my parents' condition, painted a picture no jury could ignore. David was sentenced to 6 years in prison. Nicole got 3. They were both ordered to pay restitution, though we all knew we'd never see that money. The house was returned to my parents. We spent a month cleaning it, refurbishing it, erasing every trace of David and Nicole. Mom couldn't bear to live there after everything that had happened, so we sold it. The money went into a trust for their care. On the day the sale closed, I drove my parents past the house one last time. Dad looked at it for a long moment. 45 years, he said. Raised 2 children there. Celebrated birthdays, holidays, anniversaries, and it ends like this. "It ends with you safe," I said, "with you loved and cared for. That's what matters." "You saved us," Mom said from the back seat. "If you hadn't come home when you did..." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. We all knew how it could have ended. 2 elderly people, forgotten in a garage, dying from neglect while their son lived in luxury in their house. It's been 3 years now. My parents live in a beautiful assisted living community near me. I see them every day. We have dinner together twice a week. Dad's health has stabilized, and Mom's doing much better emotionally, though she still has bad days. David writes letters from prison. Long letters, filled with apologies and explanations and justifications. We don't read them. His lawyer says he'll be up for parole in another year. When that time comes, we'll be at the hearing. And we'll tell the parole board exactly what he did. Nicole got out after 18 months on good behavior. She moved to California, as far from us as she could get while staying in the continental United States. She sent one email, a brief apology that rang hollow. I deleted it without responding. Sometimes I think about those 4 years I spent in Singapore, how I'd call every week, never realizing what was happening, how I'd been so focused on my own life, my own success, that I'd missed the signs that my parents were in trouble. I can't change the past. I can't undo the months they spent cold and hungry and scared in that garage, but I can make sure their remaining years are filled with warmth, with love, with dignity. I came home 4 years too late. But I came home, and I brought my parents home with me. That's what family does. Even when it's hard. Even when it means fighting your own brother in court. Even when it means hearing terrible things you can never unhear. You fight. You protect the people you love. And you make sure justice is served, no matter how long it takes. Because in the end, family isn't about blood. It's about showing up. It's about being there when it matters most. And I learned something else. Never underestimate a daughter who realizes her parents are in danger. I came home without warning, and what I did to my brother and his wife is something they'll never forget.